English lessons for refugees online. Now, obviously, if you're looking at this on your computer, you can have a reasonably good use of the computer, and there's no reason whatsoever, if you've got the time, that you could be teaching refugees English online. Now, many people I can't teach, and get very scared. We can all teach. You just need somebody to guide you a little bit. Now, I'm a retired secondary school teacher. I taught design technology, and I've been teaching refugees for 4 years. The first year was spent teaching in the refugee camp at Calais, the jungle. I, along with some Portuguese support workers, started up a school, Darfur School, where we taught mainly Sudanese, a few other nationalities, but on the whole, it was Sudanese young men that we taught. Now, many people visited the jungle during that year, particularly in holiday times. Lots of young people from university, and I used to often give them a lift into the camp, not only to make it easy for them to get to the camp, but also to think, oh, would you like to do some teaching? Every time, oh, no, I can't teach. But 99 times out of 100, those young people are absolutely brilliant teachers. Really, really good. Just a little bit confidence, and they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's not rocket science to do what you would be required to do. Now, on the board here, I've listed characteristics of a mainstream teacher that is required. I'm going to go through them, and there are more, but these are real basic ones, and you'll find you're not going to need all these. Now, number one, empathy with your learner. You're on this page, you're worried about refugees, you've got the empathy, you understand that where they're coming from to a certain degree. We're not going to understand the trauma they've gone through. We're not going to understand the stresses and strains of getting to the UK, worrying about their families. We know they're coming from a bad place. So we bear that in mind when we're teaching them. Understand the significance of education. Now, we live in a society where it's drummed into us that we need qualification, we need to pass these tests. From a teacher point of view, that is really the wrong way of teaching. We want to produce young people that can think critically and solve problems. Good teaching will incorporate this into the education, their lessons. It's very, very difficult to do with the constraints of the national curriculum. But without going into the politics of education, education is important. When you've learned something, how good you feel about yourself. There's so many hidden positive, what's the word I'm looking for, traits that come from education. And with these guys that come in, many are coming from countries where they've never been to school. They perhaps just learnt to write and read the Quran, and that's it. They haven't learned how to learn, so it's going to be difficult for them. But you'll find as you see them starting to learn, it's like a flower opening up. It's just like they blossom. And believe me, once you start seeing that, you think, gosh, this is worth this. And once you see them reading, writing, doing some basic arithmetic, I can't explain the emotions that you feel. Believe me, once you get there, you think this is great. You might even want to start teaching. Hopefully you do. Right, classroom management. Now, if you're a mainstream teacher, classroom management is the be-all and end-all to teach. Every teacher that finishes Teachers Training College, university, PGCE, Their biggest skill, their biggest scare is getting into that classroom with 13 to 14-year-olds, or in a primary school, 30 to 35 primary school kids. I don't know which is the worst. I think I prefer 13 to 14-year-olds. I can handle them better. I can't handle lots of kids that are, have all sorts of they're not problems, but all sorts of needs. So classroom management, you won't need it. You're going to have people that you're going to teach in. You'll ask any teacher. Best students are adults because they want to learn. You're not going to get any of the behavioural problems, and it's great. So you don't need classroom management. That's one of the, you're just not going to need it. Your students are going to want to learn. Subject knowledge. You're teaching English. You can speak English. Your learners can't. Don't worry about it. Okay, so you're going to come to later on to learn verbs, adjectives, and modal verbs, auxiliary verbs. Well, you learn that the day before you teach it, unless you're an English graduate or you're in English. You're very knowledgeable in English. I was never taught grammar at school. I went there a long time ago, but I've learned so much grammar since I've been teaching refugees. And because you're doing it step by step, you think, oh, that's not too bad. I understand that. That's good. And you'll realise that all these years you've been saying it correctly, doing it correctly on the whole. So no big sweat. So subject knowledge. Yes, you're going to need somebody to guide you through how you first start, where you're going to start from. But hopefully I'm going to supply more guidance on how to deliver lessons, what to do, what not to do. But you'll often find that once you start, you'll develop your own style, your own what you want to do. It's going to be dependent on your learner. You might find you're going quite fast. You might find that it's going to take you 3 lessons to get one concept over. So don't worry about it. I really can't emphasize how easy is not the correct word to use, but how naturally it comes for you to want to teach. You're here because you've got empathy. So if you've got empathy, you can teach. End of story. Where do we get to? Class subject knowledge. You know English. Now, multi-intelligences use a multi-intelligence approach to their teaching. Now, I'm not sure whether all teachers, I went to a really good university from a teaching point of view, and I spent 4 years learning how to learn and learning how to teach. And we were introduced to a guy called Howard Gardner that believed, and I really, really believe it myself, is that there's lots of different intelligences, how we learn. He said there's the visual, the verbal, the musical, the logical, the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, the naturalistic, and the kinesthetic. Now, that might sound a bit confusing, but I know every one of you say, I learn better by doing it, physically doing it. I learn better by reading it. I learn better by actually seeing it. So everything you said are all incorporated into one of those intelligences. We've all got them, but in most of us, many of us, one is more prominent. Some people like a logical, mathematical approach to learning. Some people like a musical, rhythmic way of learning. It's not to say that you learn your grammar by putting it to music, but it's the way your brain processes information that makes that way of learning easier for you. How can I better explain? I'll explain that from when I was a child, which was a long time ago, and we learnt our tables every morning. We would go into the classroom, we'd sit down, and on the wall would be colourful posters of the multiplication tables. So we got the visual thing. They were there in front of us. And if you had a good primary school teacher, usually a she, there would be flowers and insects and birds. So a real visual kind of impact. And then you would then start reading. So you then got the kind of the verbal part of it. The logical part is coming into it because it's mathematics. And the musical part, 1 2 is 2, 2 2 to 4, 3 2 to 6. So we've got this rhythmic musical part of it. So by learning our tables, we actually incorporated a lot of those intelligences, which, and I think maybe my generation, we learned our tables very quickly. So it addressed those intelligences. Now, when you come to teach and you become familiar with the student you're teaching, because if it's on one-to-one online, it's only going to be one at a time, you'll get to identify what approach you need to have. You're not going to sing out your lessons or do artistic. Well, I'm saying artistic. I often resort to drawing pictures to get people to understand. And you might want to say like sunrise, or you might want to illustrate one day. So you would do an horizon and perhaps do a tree in it. You get the sun going up, going across. So you've just drawn one day, and a visual person, I understand what he's trying to tell us. It's one day, 24 hours. Midday, the sun's there right above you. Now, that is in the early stages, because obviously when people become more familiar with learning, you can use logical, you can use verbal. You've got to use it because that's what language is made up of. But as you become more experienced, you're going to identify with your students how they're going to teach. Now, you may have went to school when lessons were differentiated. In your classroom, you had 30, 35 children, and they all learn in different ways. Some might, you might get a pocket of logical, a pocket of verbal, and it was up to your teacher to address everybody. It's impossible. And what you usually found is that the teacher would address the middle range. So then that's when your classroom management came in, because you get the really bright kids, not bright is not the right word, the really capable kids who were not being stretched. The kids that found things difficult were still finding it difficult. The kids in the middle were kind of okay, but they were being distracted by the kids that were really pissed off because they're being pulled back. And the kids that found things difficult just couldn't cope. So you then got the dynamic in the classroom, whereas everybody suffered. Now, I don't believe in separating those groups out. I believe that in a classroom, you should have 3 or 4 teachers, so all those kids could learn together. But that's my philosophy on education for children. Back to you people. Now, hopefully you want to start teaching. It is not difficult. If you start with a friend, problem is once you start with a learner, it's unfair to stop. To make sure you're willing to commit, and make sure that you can stand in front of a camera and talk to yourself if necessary, is exactly what I'm doing now. I'm in the middle of France, talking to myself. This is my 3rd attempt at this video. The first 2, I've been talking to myself all this time and it wasn't recorded. So you've got to get used to performing, if you like. And one other thing is, when you've got your student in front of you, if they can't speak any English at all, You can make them understand by a universal understand. You can communicate in a way saying, if you understand, yeah, it's good. Smile, yeah, it's good. Understand. And if you say at the same time, understand, they would associate understand with yeah, which is kind of normal. It was kind of international anyway. You don't understand? No? You don't understand? Okay. Um, you kind of understand, but you need more explanation. If they need more explanation, they might need another way of you approaching what they find difficult. But you have to be careful there, because if you're approaching it from a different angle, they could quite easily misinterpret that you're trying something complete, another different fact altogether. So it's just a matter of experience with the refugee, the learner that you're building up your relationship with. If you're doing 2 or 3 on different days of the week, you might find your approach is completely different. Often it is good if you've got 2 refugees. It makes it easier for them to not feel so self-conscious, bounce ideas off of each other, and then you can use the 2 of them to make yourself the joke. If there's any laughing in the classroom, which there should be, they're laughing at you until you know your students, and then you think, well, we can tease this one. For me, it's a lot easier because I'm an older person, and I'm a bit like the uncle that teases the nephews and nieces. So it's kind of easier for me. But many of you are going to be similar ages to the guys you're teaching, so it's not going to be perhaps so easy. But you have got the advantage of being out of the learning environment and thinking, oh God, yeah, that used to be real. I never understood that. So you can relate a lot more. Right, I hope this has been helpful. I really hope many of you say, right, I'm gonna try this out and see what happens.